Whoa, Nelly! Before we get started here, I need to make a quick note. I wrapped this episode and sent an advance copy out on February 8th, 2018 at about 6:45 p.m. By February 9th, 2018 at 10 a.m., I received an email from Mike Boudet, the subject of today's show. Hey, Dave. Someone alerted me that you finally finished this podcast that you've been working on for almost a year now. I have to say, it has caused me a lot of unnecessary anxiety in that time, since your initial approach was to take Reddit to ask for dirt about me. Having now heard it, I'm glad you did not decide to take the easy route, and it's obvious you put quite a great deal of work into it. You did get a few things factually wrong, such as the fact I went to Berklee College of Music in Boston, not University of California, Berkeley, and that the band that calls itself Lounge Act and released the album Procrastinate Now has nothing to do with me and never did. But other than that, you did enough research to pretty much determine that I'm a normal human being like everyone else. Not some picture of moralistic perfection the way some very sensitive people online seem to expect me to be. Having said that, there's one part of your podcast which is littered with inaccuracies and straight-up deception that I felt compelled to let you know before you publish it. So here it is. Before we continue this email, you'll have to listen to this episode. If you're listening on the day of release, you'll see I've already uploaded the follow-up. But in order to fully understand, you'll need to listen to this episode first. So please, sit back and enjoy. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. True crime podcasts have taken off in the last few years like a rocket. Podcasting and true crime reporting have a good relationship these days. Near the top of most best of true crime podcast lists, you'll find a show called Sword and Scale. A simple name, a simple logo. The episode titles are as minimal as they can be. Episode 1, Episode 2, 3, 4, repeat. The format? Playing audio from cases and weaving them into stories. The show is good, but that, of course, is an opinion. Welcome to Dave Rex Presents. In this edition of the podcast, we look at Mike Boudet, host of Sword and Scale. An internet radio show and website covering the dark underworld of crime and the criminal justice system's response to it. The show and website were launched January 1st, 2014, and feature stories of murder, abduction, rape, and even more bizarre forms of crime. It's the purest form of true crime where nothing is off the table. Everything from 911 calls to court testimony, interviews with victims, and sometimes with perpetrators give listeners a 360-degree look at the entire story. Told from the narrator's point of view, our show goes beyond the news clips and the sensationalist headlines to give listeners the whole story and deeper insight into the cases it covers than any other medium. Like that? It's from the ZipRecruiter Incongruity LLC post, investigative podcast host, journalist position. Owned by Mike Boudet. Boudet. Boudet premiered his true crime audio podcast January 1st, 2014. Since then, he's hired multiple people for different positions at Incongruity LLC. Mike's success in the recent world of podcast is deserved for the amount of work he puts into the show. At least that depends on who you ask. I've been listening to podcasts for years now, and I survey the landscape. Not to say I'm always on the ball with the latest and greatest. I knew about Sword and Scale for a long time without knowing anything about the show. Not its format, not its host. I, like many others, enjoy true crime podcasts. There's many to choose from, and even serialized content about a single event, not just serial. I had listened to a good handful of these and moved my way over to Sword and Scale, starting with episode 79. Now, before I tell you about listening to that episode and what it's about, let me tell you, I believe it is very well delivered. It's told with blinders on the listener, not exposing the centerpiece of the story until episode 80. I recommend if you think you want that experience to be retained when hearing these episodes, please simply listen to them in that order and don't read the description on episode 80. While it seems to be a lot of preamble, understand it was the way the story was put together by this creator. While in no way does it need to be consumed like that, it will enhance the experience. Okay, are you not going to listen anyway? Well, the 2-part episode is about the Craigslist killer. Mike plays an abundance of police interrogation audio with minimal interjection. Initially, we hear the fiancé of the killer being questioned, followed by the killer himself. I have to say I was enthralled. Of course, I started on the back catalog and enjoyed the majority of episodes. During my listening binge, I used the World Wide Web to look up more information on the show, beginning with the website, followed by Reddit, where I was hit with an oddity. Like I said, I've been listening to podcasts for years, but what I found was different. A serious distaste for the host. To the point, a sticky thread is at the top of the Sword and Scale subreddit, titled, "Let's Talk About Mike and the Subreddit." As new members start to show up, it may be best to fill them in. Mike is currently banned from Reddit as a whole. He has a history of harassing users with threats of litigation and doxing. He even wrote me on Facebook demanding my address. He has a history of spamming other subreddits with his sock puppet accounts about how great his podcast is. His methods change. It started with creating accounts that were obviously him and exclaiming free speech. That's where he intentionally made it obvious it was him, with accounts like not Mike Boudet. Recently, he started creating 3-day-old accounts with maybe 2 comments in their history and arguing smarter. He'll state, "Oh well, Mike isn't the best, but the show is great. The Patreon subscription was totally worth it." What? I was kind of surprised. Now, to be shit on for success while on the high seas of the net isn't uncommon at all. But this? I started digging. Some of the earliest online presence of Mike Boudet that I've found is an article from 1996 discussing his music career by John Floyd for the Miami New Times. Mike talks about his upcoming EP from his band Lounge Act, titled Enjoy the Cancer.
There's no hell I haven't seen. In a dream, it's so becoming of you. Don't expect too much from me. Change your shape and shed your skin. Breathe that adrenaline in. She's busy in the back with him. Leave me with these thoughts of killing you or filling you with love.
At the time, 21-year-old Boudet co-owned a recording studio, Tapeworm Studios Incorporated, or Threshold Studios, depending on where you look. In the 1990s, Mike had taken a break from playing in other bands to take classes at University of California in Berkeley for 2 years. He learned a large amount about the business side of music. Promotion was understood by Mike. While honing those skills would take trial and error, he was well equipped to begin his career in the public eye. With this under his belt, he founded Tapeworm, or like I said, Threshold Studios, and began recording his EP. The album, Enjoy the Cancer, is described by Mike in the article. It's really personal. It's all about one thing, and it involves another person. It's about a relationship, like a lot of records are, I guess. It just got really fucked up. A grunge sound mixed with electronic synth, the album is angry and vengeful. Mike is quoted at the end of the article as saying, "I was kind of scared about putting it out. A lot of people, friends of mine, knew what happened, and they knew exactly what the album was about." When asked if the person whom the EP was about had heard it, Boudet replied, "I'm pretty sure she has. I don't really know, though. I don't talk to that person anymore. If it were me, I'd want to hear it." Finally, asked what he would think of the album had it been about him. "I'm not sure. I think I'd be scared." Mike would continue his career with another album released under the Lounge Act title called Introvert, following this up by titling his act Introvert and releasing the album Human under the new band name. Lounge Act went on to release at least one more album, Procrastinate Now, without Mike, as he had left that side of media growth when it comes to music, instead focusing on marketing at a desk job. But if you think he simply went from there to Sword and Scale, you would be mistaken. In this time, between the earliest 2000s and 2014, Mike Boudet hosted 3 separate podcasts I've found history of. One of these is being released over at Sword and Scale's Patreon page for the $5 level or higher. The show over there is Universe of Mystery, a show covering UFOs, the supernatural, the weird. Another was Universe of Luxury, covering the high-priced items only the 1% would purchase. As of the recording of this episode, the website is still up and running. The accompanying podcast, however, is not. And third, from what I can tell, Am I Bugging You, a Florida-based comedy podcast, beside the aforementioned Universe of Mystery available through Patreon, Mike has made both Am I Bugging You and Universe of Luxury unavailable. While 2 of the 3 shows are unavailable to find as of right now, they were full shows with quality and work put into them. If you look up the websites on archive.org, you will find that they were built, clean setups, and well-produced. Plus, when listening to Universe of Mystery, you'll notice that Mike does use a lot of the same techniques and had a high-quality sound at that time as well.
Hello and welcome to Sword and Scale's debut episode. Today we have a chilling story of familicide. This first episode was originally going to include other segments, but the story we're about to tell you is so fascinating.
By the time Sword and Scale was on the workbench, Boudet had a good grasp of podcasts. Soon after the release, however, things slowly began to become aggressive. The full history is typed out by others or in screenshots, but that's the real rub of the thing. This isn't an archived story. It's been deleted and essentially rewritten by anyone who wants to throw in their 2 cents. So, what happened? From what I can gather, it began with Reddit and Twitter. Mike quickly gained a reputation for deleting negative comments, both big and small. His sniper-like moderation of these platforms, as well as his website, was a big problem for some listeners. As time went on, Mike would be banned from his own Sword and Scale subreddit, and Reddit as a whole. So I reached out to Reddit and created a post for information to create this episode. The responses came in quickly.
I started listening to podcasts maybe 2 years ago. Before that, I didn't know anything about them.
This is Tanya.
Finally, I got to listening to Sword and Scale, and it blew my mind. You know, the stories were so compelling. A lot of them I didn't know. I always did like true crime, but I didn't realize my fascination for true crime until I started listening to Sword and Scale.
When I began looking into this story a few months ago, she replied to the Reddit post. As a Sword and Scale fan, as well as having seen the claims, I wanted to know why she was so willing to reach out.
I guess the reason for being so forthcoming is because I'm a huge fan of Sword and Scale, just in general, and I've seen all the attacks that have taken place not just towards Mike or the show, but all the fans with it too. Anybody who supports the show is looked at as a quote, what they say, dumb girl, fangirl, you know. And I don't think that's my case. You know, I try to look at every perspective, but every time I try to give my opinion, I get banned, I get blocked, and after I get blocked, they start attacking me. And that's kind of the reason that it's so annoying to me, because I can't even imagine what they do to Mike if they're doing these kind of things to fans.
I wanted to know if I was alone in thinking this story was different than most internet hate.
Honestly, I guess because I listen to comedy podcasts a lot, comedians get a lot of online hate also. The podcast I listen to, which is Tiger Belly, with one of my second favorite other than Sword and Scale, they also get a lot of hate to the point where they were essentially blackmailed, or they attempted to blackmail them, and they had to pull down an episode. So it's not something new, online, Kalila, who's the second host, Bobby Lee's girlfriend, also gets a lot of hate to the point where, they're just trolling her and calling her a gold-digging whore, basically. So I guess because of that show, I've seen that online hate is really becoming a problem, because I think Sword and Scale has it up there, but I see a lot of comedians who also get it. I mean, Bobby Lee's talked about, they've called his advertisers, they've called his management, they've gone to extremes to not let him work.
I asked Tanya about Mike being banned from his own Sword and Skull subreddit, and if that seemed different than being attacked by listeners.
Well, I got banned from the subreddit.
Well, I understand that is not something that is brand new or completely insane for somebody to get banned, especially for negative comments, and there is plenty to be found there. But
well, the thing is,
host
they
himself,
didn't ban me for negative comments. They banned you. This is the question I asked when I was banned from the Sword and Scale. So there's two subreddits that I know of, the Sword and Scale. There's the Sword and Scale, all spelled out, and then there's Sword Scale, right?
yes.
That's the only two that I have found. The Sword and Scale, I got banned with the first comment I left. My comment was, is there anyone here who actually likes the show? It seems like everyone either hates the show or hates Mike. That was the one and only question I ever asked, and I got banned.
I mean, I don't have a great response. That is definitely a bullshit way to get banned from any subreddit.
Yeah, and I even went to message them, and I basically asked them why I got banned. And I'll read you the reply. I don't mind. So I said, why am I banned? ? And then the response was, sup, Mike? And I put, I am not Mike. Hello, my name is Tanya. Why am I banned exactly? I would like to know. And then I said, I am willing to verify that I am not Mike. After that, that was the same day. I messaged them about 55 days later, and I said, am I ever going to get unbanned? It's pretty absurd that I get banned for one question, don't you think? After that, I got muted, where I couldn't even message the mods anymore.
Whoa. Okay. So that wasn't fun. Well, I had to ask, what about interactions with Mike? Positive? Negative? Have you ever talked to him?
Well, I am a top supporter on Sword and Scale Patreon, so I have had about 2-hour conversation with him on the phone. Other than that, I've never met him. I've never had... He came down to LA for a meet and greet, and I actually wanted to meet him, but he didn't have a meet and greet, so...
Oh, that's pretty cool, though.
yeah, other than that, I did have a 2-hour conversation with him. And, I mean, he seems like, an awesome guy. I can't say that I got any kind of, negative thing from him. He's always super cool. He's always very, very interactive with the fans. Even when we had the 2-hour conversation, he had seen me, on Twitter where I would, post or reply or something. He kind of knew me as like a super fan because I had been on pretty much all social media.
Well, that seems good. Mike knows his fans, at least his super fans. He has positive interactions with them.
Yeah, and I mean, even like, for example, if you check like the fan group and stuff, he comments all the time. He's very interactive with us, not just me. He knows me as like a super fan. So he'll comment on my stuff. Like, for example, recently maybe a month or two ago, he brought out a picture of a new shirt. And I'm like, oh, man, like I just got done paying taxes. I can't afford to buy this right now, but I will soon. And his reply was, Tanya, you're such a huge fan that I'll just send you one.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So, I mean, I can't sit here and say that he's a horrible person because at least in my experience, he's not.
Well, as far as Mike goes, it looks like he's had positive interactions with at least some of his fans. So, what about the others?
As far as their attacks, you should look into this also. They've started attacking fans and their businesses.
Really?
A girl in the Facebook group, recently put screenshots of people on the Problem with Sword and Scale talking about leaving fake reviews on her business. And that's why I have now taken anything about my employment off. And I wanted to let you know about that because that's very severe to me.
Attacks on somebody's business who's not involved with the show? Just a fan? This seems excessive.
Yeah. And fair warning, if you make this anything positive, they'll attack you too.
Hi there. Your email was passed on to me, and I saw on Reddit you're wanting to talk to people about Sword and Scale. I left a reply there, but it seems it was about 11 days ago, so I wasn't sure if you checked it. I've been a fan of Sword and Scale for a year or so. I found it by chance, and it was the first podcast I ever listened to. I never knew anything about the fandom or the haters. I just knew I liked it and decided to be a Patreon for the perks. I remember early on tweeting about Sword and Scale and some trolls harassing. The fan whose personal business was being put on blast, Raina, contacted me. She owns a mermaid business. Give it a minute. She'll explain some of it.
So I live in Canada, and I run my own award-winning business, and we get to do a lot of really amazing things as mermaids. I employ a team of 10. We travel around the world. We do a lot of work for Canadian television, so Canadian TV shows and Canadian music videos, commercials, things like that. I've published some books. I do a lot of training, and I do a lot of advocacy work for children and families and the ocean. So just with that sort of gambit of things, I get to do all kinds of different fun bookings. And over the years, I've built up quite the social media following, so I think I'd be sort of classified as like a social media influencer. And because of that, I do a lot of sort of, cross-promotion things with different groups I'm interested in. Right now, I've got a clothing line I'm doing work with, a really cool pair of mermaid sneakers.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah, it's cool. Fins, but sometimes it's not ocean or mermaid themed stuff. It's just, they want to get someone with a big following to check it out. So I'm also I'm doing one on like essential oils, like it's crazy.
Wow. A lot on her plate, and the plates are spinning. That's almost another podcast. So we got to Sword and Scale.
So when I first found Sword and Scale, I started listening to it about a year ago, and it was my first introduction to podcasts ever. And just sort of found it by chance. I do a lot of work on the computer. I'm sure you guys do as well, but just editing photos and videos for clients as part of the business, maintaining the brand online and everything. And, it can just get monotonous. So it's nice to listen to things. And I think I just found it through an ad or something. And I've always loved the true crime genre. So I'm like a Dateline junkie, Yeah. So, and I've always loved like superhero movies too. Like I sort of love anything where the bad guy gets caught. And in our own business, actually, we do charity work for women's shelters and at-risk youth. So it's always been something I've gravitated towards and been interested in. And I listened to it for a year. I was completely unaware of any drama. I just assumed because of the show's success that the people who make it would probably be pretty unreachable, and I never really investigated, just enjoyed it for what it was. I decided to become a Patreon because I really just wanted access to the extra episodes and the early releases as well, and just like a moderate amount, like $10, which, it's Canadian, so it's like $13.
Of course.
Yeah, right. So, and I just really enjoyed it. And this early on this year, I found out there was a fan group, and I joined it, and I really liked it.
Facebook and Mike Boudet. Another part of the muddy history told verbally and through screenshots. So, while all is contestable, the most likely case is that the context is off. This doesn't make all the claims and statements wrong, nor does it mean out of context some of this is okay. Facebook is another platform Mike was known for monitoring comments on. But that isn't where shit gets hairy this time. In the time Mike had been on Facebook, other true crime podcast groups, one in particular, had a group of fans that were quite clear-cut on their hatred of Mike and Sword and Scale. In a short time, a group called The Problem with Sword and Scale popped up. So as I spoke with Raina, she informed me the current group you will find on Facebook is The Problem with the Sword and Scale group. A group as silly as it sounds, dedicated to another group. The original Problem with Sword and Scale group is now hidden and can't be found. You must be invited. Mike contributed himself to Facebook, and this blew up on him in short order. On a post in a comedy true crime podcast group for the show My Favorite Murder, a fan was having a bad day and wrote to state in her supportive group of fans, "Just got brutally dumped, and I'm taking refuge in My Favorite Murder. Might as well be upset and scared than upset and heartbroken. Hashtag kill hard." While the comments are normal, one is from Boudet. This is a commonly talked about thread. I visited the post when it was still live. Mike pops in to say one word. Sup. Mike is told by one of the commenters to, quote, "Stop creeping on our members." Mike replies with a ha-ha. When another person in the thread says, "She's not joking," Mike simply says, "Yeah, I don't take orders from Alex." Now, there are many ways to take this, but it's worth noting this is a portion of the story that always seems to come up and part of the Facebook dilemma, or at least part of Mike's direct contribution to it. But with all of that said, Facebook groups for any show can be a cool and fun community to be a part of, if you like the source material. For Raina, it was exactly that at first.
So, yeah, I just really enjoyed it. I started meeting some people. We had a thread like where people are from, and I was really surprised to see how many Canadians were in it. I got my tattoo artist in it.
Awesome.
Yeah, it was really fun. And for me, like being someone who really didn't know anything about podcasts, joining that community was sort of my jumping stone into the podcast world. So, then I found Criminal, which I love, and Serial, and Welcome to Night Vale. And like, it was like this whole world opened up just from sort of meeting this community of people. So that was just really cool. And I, I always like to try to find weird little ways to make my mermaid work crossover with my different interests. I do music for fun and play guitar, so we've done some fun things with that. And anyway, as part of being a Patreon, I got a T-shirt, and I thought, I've done a few underwater photo shoots where I've had different T-shirts on for bands and for artists that I support and things like that. So I thought, that would be cool. I see people in the group posting their merch, so I'll post my T-shirt. And it was an idea I had for a while, but I actually had some bad stuff happen at the beginning of the year around this time. My mom passed away very suddenly, and it was a really traumatizing experience. So when I went out to get a swim and I just got together with some of my girls to have some fun in the pool, which we never get to do. We're usually working constantly, so getting a chance to actually swim for fun is like the biggest treat ever. So I just thought, I'll throw the shirt in the bag, and, towards the end of our swim, I'll get a neat little video. And my idea was to sort of like use it as a way to teach people about Patreon, because I felt like not enough people really knew that was out there and that you could support different people. One of my friends who's a mermaid performer out west, she has one. So yeah, I made this little video, and I'm wearing my shirt, and there's like little captions that just explain what Patreon is and how I found this podcast, and because of Patreon I could support it, and it supports artists, and then I encourage people to like check out Patreon, and it's just this neat little clip, right? I'm in my shirt and it's cool. And I took a couple screenshots from it and like sent it to the Sword and Scale folks and put it in the group and whatever, and just sort of never really thought about it again for a long time. I had no idea it was going viral this way. I had, because of being in that community, people started to hint at this other page, The Problem with Sword and Scale. And I thought, well, I like to be educated on these things, so I think I should probably investigate this, because I definitely don't want to be supporting somebody who goes against my morals and values, and don't want to be giving them money and stuff. And so I thought, yeah, I better check this out, because I am somebody, I'll not go to a movie if I've heard, that the people weren't paid properly, or there was some kind of big controversy that I disagree with, or something like that's just me. I'll go, okay, I'm going to choose not to support that. So I started, I went in this group, and I started reading the posts and trying to investigate, and it was all over the place, and then I saw this post of me. I was like, oh my God, I'm in this group.
When I heard this, I asked Raina, as somebody with an online personality, what's it like to still find yourself in a place that you didn't anticipate, in a negative light?
I'm used to, my stuff gets stolen a lot. I've actually had to go after a New York Times bestselling author because they put one of my photos on the cover of their book.
Holy shit.
Yeah, and I didn't know until I found it in the library. So my lawyers had a lot of fun with that, and I did get paid. So, and I've had my stuff go viral on Reddit before. I got #1 on the front page, and I beat out the Foo Fighters, which was like a really cool moment because I love the Foo Fighters. So yeah, it wasn't so much like the surrealness of seeing myself. Like, I figured like the picture would make the rounds. I think it was just like #1, the shock of it being like, oh, there's an actual hate group. And then #2, people claiming, and I don't have a screenshot of this exact comment, but you could probably still find it in there. Somebody claiming that they knew me and that I was underage, and that Mike was grooming me, and I'm 31.
So it's clear facts are being spewed, but they don't have a backing. So, are they facts? Well, unfortunately for Raina, This didn't happen once.
And so I kind of just at first thought, oh yeah, that's funny. And then they were trying to use my image to like support their fight against Mike, because he made sort of like a catcalling comment about boobs, and I can't remember exactly what it was. It was something like, oh well, what's under the shirt or something. And I'm totally right there with people. Like, that's not an appropriate thing to say to a fan. And I actually said that to Mike, and nobody seems to have screenshot that. But I told him we have a word for when men do that when we're in our costumes in the mermaid industry. So I said, don't be a mervert.
Oh.
Yeah. So I was like, don't be a mervert. And, I've actually, there's a few things I've seen over the couple of months where I was in the fan page where somebody would bring up something that Mike said. And, I did disagree with it. Like, I remember there was somebody quoted his Twitter where he said something about mansplaining and sexism. And I was like, well, I see your point, but here's the other side of it. And hopefully you can be a little open-minded to that. And that was it. That was like the conversation. So I have like no problem. I just think it's really funny because people like to show this issue sort of fragmented, and they don't show where we kind of chat and then kind of get over it, and it doesn't bother me. And I don't feel that it was said in a malicious way, but I absolutely understand why it could come across that way to people. It was just really weird because, just seeing myself and seeing people using it as an argument, and it was something that happened months ago that I completely forgot about, and I'm obviously not losing any sleep over, like, right. Like, I feel like I held him accountable, and then we resolved it, and that was that. So yeah, but it was pretty bizarre. And I checked out that group, and there's a lot I can say about that, but maybe I'll just fast forward to the second time I found myself in the group.
So yes, this fan did find themselves in the group again. And this is where things get a little personal.
So, I'm always very careful about what I post online, because if I'm saying something, I always feel like, what if a potential client sees this or something? And so I choose to talk about things that are important to me. And when I'm talking about things in the Sword and Scale fan group, it's usually things about victims' rights and things that I see happening. Having worked with kids who have gone through things like this, like, it's really it means a lot to me. Like, it's really important to me to see that kind of advocacy happen. So, I'm never ashamed of anything I say or anything. And I just, there was discussion going on about that group, and somebody from that group had added me to it. And there's like 200 people who are in both groups, so people get added and they don't even know they've been added, because that's what Facebook does. Like, they don't send you really a notification. You don't get to approve or reject it. People can just add you to groups now. And so I'm in the fan group, and I'm having this conversation, and this one girl says, like, oh, somebody added me to that group and I didn't realize it. And I said, yeah, they do that. And so just that little exchange got screenshot and put in this other group, the Problem with Sword and Scale. And they're just ripping on us in the comments, to the point that this girl who made the initial comment got scared and like left and turned off her Facebook. And I think I sent you a screenshot of that. And then for me, somebody else comes on and they're just like, you need to go to her business. Here's exactly what her business is. Rate it 1 star. Report her photo from like 6 months ago in my Sword and Scale shirt for being inappropriate content. And then just saying like, oh, somebody who works with children shouldn't listen to true crime and things like that. And it was really shocking. And I went ahead and turned off reviews. This is a way that people, competing businesses will do that to harass each other. They'll put on fake reviews because there's no way to dispute it, So I'm really proud. We have like 5 stars, and I didn't want to risk that. And you never know if people look into things. So I just, as soon as I was alerted to that, I turned off my reviews. And in that group, some of the members came forward and said, I'm not okay with this. Like, her business is her business, and lots of us have different jobs and listen to Sword and Scale, and we shouldn't be rating somebody 1 star. And then one of the moderators pretty much shrugged it off and was like, I'm going to leave it up. And I know like one of the girls who did send me the screenshots and said like I stood up because I felt this was inappropriate. Right after saying that she felt it was inappropriate, she got removed from the group. So yeah, it was really weird. I think that's really personal and an intense level of hate for the podcast to go to that extreme. And once that started happening, I just started investigating, and I found that I wasn't the only person this was happening to. And I just think that's really nuts. If somebody likes a different sports team than you do and has all the reasons in the world to like them or not like them, you're not going to go after their business for being a fan of a different sports team, or movies or franchises or anything. It was just very, very bizarre. It was very much one of these, like, you're either with us or against us, and if you're against us, we're coming for you kind of things. And I don't take to that very well.
I asked Raina if these reviews were for her website or for her Facebook business page.
Yeah, it was Facebook, and I turned it off, so I didn't get any, thankfully, but I think that's because I turned it off right away. But still, just the fact that they encouraged it and it was brought up as a concern and the moderators still dismissed it, I was ready to have my lawyer send a letter. People think that kind of stuff is frivolous, but it's not. I've actually won cases against people for trying to pull similar stuff. It is libelous and it is like intentional to harm someone's business, and you're not a client and there's no reason for it. So it's hard to do, but in cases where you've got people bragging about it and you can screenshot it, like, those cases are pretty easy to win.
So Raina's no stranger to internet hate or even dealing with those haters. But as we continued the conversation, she began to boil down her thoughts on Mike.
Yeah, and like, don't get me wrong here. Like, I like Sword and Scale. I think Mike is an okay person. I completely appreciate some of the criticism that is out there for the podcast and for how he handles himself online. I'm not the Little Mermaid in Canada here to defend Mike. He's a grown man and he can be accountable for his own actions. But that's the problem that I have with this group is that when they do these things that are wrong and you try to hold them accountable, it just becomes, oh, you're just a Mike worshiper. Oh, you're a cultist and you follow whatever he does. And it's like, no, you went after my business, so I'm pretty sure I have every right to be pissed here.
So as a fan, Raina's experienced what it's like to be singled out by people who dislike Sword and Scale, or Mike Boudet, or both. As our conversation came to a close, I asked her if there was anything else she wanted to leave on.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to say that, you can always find more information. If people find something and they think it's a little sketchy and they think like, oh, I don't know about that, that seems really extreme, then follow the rabbit trail and don't be afraid to ask. There was the drama with the episode around Skater, and one of the things that the group was using to really go against Mike was this screenshot of Skater saying, oh, Mike is now contacting my friends. And so even I was kind of like, okay, Mike, this is beating a dead horse. You have done 2 episodes on this person. You don't need to be contacting their friends. So I just kind of thought, you know what? I'm just going to ask him. So I sent him an email and I was like, I saw this and like, I'm just curious if you're going to keep doing this or what. And then he sent me back a screenshot, and his screenshot, which I gave to you, was actually Skater's friend contacting Mike saying, I want to talk to you about Skater and, challenge some of these things Skater's saying. And of course, Mike didn't do anything with it, but it's just, there's 2 sides, right? 2 sides. So it just help people can remember that and keep it in context.
So before we move on too far, we should address what Raina said regarding Skater. Episode 93 and 94 of Sword and Scale focused on the wise market shooter Randy Stair, also known as Andrew Blaze. In the process of putting the episode together, Mike spoke with Skater Landau, a friend of Randy's, who posted a video after the shooting. A tribute song for Andrew Blaze titled, I Miss You.
I miss you.
In episode 93 of Sword and Scale, Mike conducts his interview with Skater.
I decided to reach out to the guest, Randy's friend, directly and have a chat.
Hello.
Hi, this is Mike with Sword and Scale. Is this Skater?
Yep.
How you doing?
I'm good.
Thanks for taking the call. I appreciate it.
No problem.
I'd like to just ask you a little bit about how you knew this person, Randy Stair. If you could just, first of all, what do I call you?
Skater.
Okay, so you don't want to use your real name?
No, that's my real name.
That is your real name. Okay.
Yeah.
In short order, it was found out that Skater had sent Mike a message before the episode's release, stating, "Hi there, Mike. I just wanted to say I would not be comfortable with you using our phone conversation in your podcast, or anywhere for that matter. All I'm going to get out of this is some negative backlash, and I would appreciate it if my audio is not used. Please reply to this when you see it so I can confirm that you're reading this. Thanks." This comes from a screenshot in a conversation that is private with Mike Boudet. I'm not sure how it got out entirely. But, quickly, Skater took to Twitter after the episode's release. First saying, "I'm just a 21-year-old girl with autism trying to make it in life. I can't get a real job, and this only hurts my chances to make a name for myself. I can't have my fiancé pay for all my shit in my life. Please just remove that podcast. All you did was make fun of me and tried to paint me in a bad light. I'm sorry I said crazy shit. I was nervous. Just give me a break, all right?" Soon after tweeting, "At Sword and Scale, I know you're online. I saw your retweet. Stop ignoring me and call me on Skype." Followed by, "At Sword and Scale. Also, I'm a fucking girl." Again, "At Sword and Scale. Remove me from the podcast. I told you I wanted to have nothing to do with you." Finally, replying to "At Sword and Scale. I asked several times after this to not be in this. What the hell?" The backlash from this and publicity got so bad that retroactively, Mike added an introduction to episode 94. Here it is in its entirety. It's 2 minutes and 30 seconds.
There is something important I'd like to address about the last two-part episode. I contacted Skater, who identified herself as a friend of Andrew's, because I wanted to give our listeners another window into what else was going on through the killer's mind. I then asked Skater whether knowing that she had been friends with a killer had somehow impacted or changed her worldview. You may have heard the shock in my voice when she expressed that it hadn't. In the following interview, which I granted Skater after she expressed dissatisfaction with the first, I asked again. I got the same response. So I published the interview. Subsequently, Skater asked for the entirety of both interviews to be removed. I thought they were relevant to our listeners, so I declined her request. Then she updated her profile on social media and published an additional YouTube video claiming that she is autistic, which would explain her perceived lack of empathy. Of course, if I had had any indication prior to contacting her that she was indeed autistic, I would have never agreed to conduct the interview in the first place. It's not my place to diagnose people over the phone, only to ask them questions and listen and try to understand their responses. However, since all of this happened, more questions have been raised that lead me to believe that our listeners deserve to hear the whole interview, hear my reactions, as well as Skater's, and make their own judgments. The only thing I should say, though, is I mistakenly referred to Skater as he on several occasions, which I shouldn't have, because I found out after the interview that she identifies as female. Had I known this up front, I would have corrected my inadvertent mistake. The reason we refer to the killer as male during the first interview is because that's how this person presented themselves to their friends and family. And only during the Skater interviews do we learn that Randy Stair was transgender, and we refer to her as she and her from that moment on. As a storyteller, I thought that point was clear, but I can see now how some may perceive it as offensive to an already marginalized community.
Skater has since removed her video response to Mike Boudet's episodes. While I don't believe that Mike added any flames to the fire, I can't be sure that he doused them either with this response. It seems Skater, like Raina said, is enough of a can of worms, and this whole situation simply need to be put to bed. Though this does bring up an issue that is a problem for many listeners of Sword and Scale. Mike's emotional tactics toward victims.
A couple of things kind of have hit me personally. One instance, he mentioned that mental health care should be mandatory. Like if you're diagnosed with something, you should absolutely have to take whatever medication or therapy is prescribed. And I understand the sentiment behind that, but I don't see it as being a feasible possibility. I feel like that can kind of collide with your personal right to decide if you want to do that. And that hit me because I have, you can leave this in or cut it out, whatever you'd prefer. I have PTSD from a sexual assault. And so when he said that, I was just it stopped me in my tracks a little bit because I was like, I realize that I should take medication, but doing that prevents me from doing my job, from driving my car, from all that stuff. So I'm choosing to take the long road with therapy and discussions and something that is non-medical, not affecting my body that way. And I felt a little insulted that he would just kind of throw everybody who has any sort of mental disability just in one big box without taking extenuating circumstances into it. Like, yes, some people have actual chemical disorders, but other people have been traumatized or affected in some way that makes them how they are, and they can be rehabilitated without being a so-called threat to society or to themselves. So that when he mentioned that in an interview with somebody, I think I just turned that episode off and didn't even listen to the rest. I was really flustered by that one.
This is Sarah, not her real name. She preferred to be anonymous. When I first spoke to her, I mentioned it was interesting to speak to a detractor of Sword and Scale.
I wouldn't say I'm 100% a detractor. I don't like to think of myself as hating anybody, but I definitely have some concerns.
I asked if Sarah agreed with a common problem that's brought up by people who don't necessarily agree with Mike. And that is, does it seem to you that he blankets those suffering from mental illness?
It does a bit to me. He almost seems to think people with mental illnesses are maybe like feral animals. Like, yeah, you can kind of be around them, but don't turn your back on them type thing. And I guess when you're dealing with something like true crime, that's not the greatest attitude to have. I mean, I'm not going to lie. I have met so many people, especially in group therapy, where you're right. I probably wouldn't want to be in a room alone with them. But I don't think at the core, they're looking for somebody to like decapitate, like that guy on the bus or anything like that. I just think they need help and they need understanding. And I know that sounds super hippie-ish, but I don't think they're the next serial killer waiting around the corner to start something terrible. I think he takes it a little too far with that.
Hi, I'm Justin.
Hey, it's nice to meet you. Terrible circumstances.
I'm coming through fine?
Yes, you are. How am I coming through?
Perfect.
Excellent. So, not to just literally jump into the fray here, but you have been listening to podcasts for probably how long do you think? Just podcasts?
Just podcasts? Well, I mean, it's probably been a few years now. I don't have it off.
My initial interactions with Justin happened about 5 months ago, at least at the time of recording this podcast, and they were through Reddit. He actually came to moderate the Sword and Scale subreddit.
Basically, the way that it started is whenever I listen to a podcast or I find something new, I start looking around for a community. And I remember I went onto his website, and there really wasn't any community there. I saw they were actually advertising that this is way back in the day, but that there would potentially one day be a premium subscription. And I think this is before Patreon, or at least before Patreon was popular. And I was actually excited about that. I was like, oh, wow, extra episodes, etc. I'd gladly, subscribe. So I go onto Reddit eventually, and I see that there's a community, but that it's dead. All the links there are really old. And when I click on the person that's running it, I see that they've been shadow banned, and that would explain it. So I go to the subreddit where you can request dead subreddits, and I type in the Sword and Scale subreddit name, and I see that the only people requesting it seem to be people that don't like Mike. And I was like, well, that's really weird. Why would they want to do that? That's, that doesn't seem like the right thing to do. So I put in the request, and I'm given it. And then everything kind of took off from there with my conversations and Mike and everything.
Justin was gracious enough to send me some of his own screenshots, which we talked about.
If you look at the first two messages, in that screenshot, there are actually two separate ones from Mike. Before I had even gotten the podcast, what he would do is he would give incentive for people to share the podcast with other people. And if you shared it on Facebook and you had them subscribe to the Sword and Scale Facebook page, you would get a bonus episode, or maybe an episode a week earlier than it was released. So I had done that twice. You can actually see where he was saying people like you, help the podcast thrive. And after that, after I received the actual subreddit, I actually got in contact with him, and I was actually pretty excited. Hey, I got a hold of the podcast. I'd like to get a community going. It seemed like the people that were trying to get it before me are out to get you, and I'm not looking to do that. I think it would be pretty cool to kind of work together to get a thriving community going where people can really discuss this show.
In one of the screenshots sent to me, Justin shows that he had sent a message to Mike Boudet saying, "You can't steal a subreddit. They are a community hub on a site that serves as a link and discussion aggregator. Due to you being shadow banned, it makes sense for someone to step in and get the community going. I'm on the phone, but allow me in a minute to explain why it makes sense to get the head mod from Sword Scale to be a mod at Sword and Scale. It makes perfect sense politically to bring said user on as a mod. It cools their heels on starting anything, and he has agreed to shut down /r/Sword Scale once everything at Sword and Scale gets going. The best part being is that I'm the head moderator of the subreddit. If he causes any issues, then he can be removed at an instant."
When I added the other user to the subreddit, I started to learn more that apparently Mike had joined that subreddit with that moderator. And when that moderator wasn't online, Mike proceeded to vandalize the subreddit, just started deleting things on it, everything else. When that moderator came back and saw what was going on, he removed Mike from the subreddit. I don't know if Mike knew how Reddit worked at the time exactly. He fixed everything, and then through a series of private messages, Mike threatened legal action and various other things. And from there, that's when I started learning other ways that his behavior was increasingly problematic.
One of the very first times I spoke to Justin was through a message on Reddit, actually requesting an interview, which he declined.
I haven't even, like I said, Mike hasn't even came into my consideration in months. There were no bans in that time. I wasn't really very super active. In fact, when you initially wanted to interview me, at that point, I had mostly just moved on. I'm married. I have a stepdaughter and now a step grandson, and I just been spending a lot of time with my grandson. And the thing that happened is I was actually in the process of practicing walking with my grandson. When I sat down and I pull up my phone because I noticed I've been getting notifications where people were messaging me and say, yeah, Mike has been like posting your photograph on Twitter. He goes on these random rants in which he usually deletes, like, the next day. It seems like he considers better of some of the things he said, and he'll go and he'll delete the various tweets. And I had no idea any of this was going on. And the weirdest thing about that is that I know he deleted some more recently. It's a shame because I didn't get to document it because, again, I have other things to do. But he started going on about how, like, for the past year I've been stalking him, and that all I do is think about him and listen to the show and listen to the Sword and Scale Rewind and, just troll him endlessly or whatever. But apparently it's completely in reverse because there had been rants about my person that I had no idea what that was going on. When I contacted you again on Reddit, that was me basically realizing, wow, this guy's posting my personal information and doxing me on Twitter.
Mike's initial post says, "Make your bed, then lie," followed by Justin's username. This is posted to his official Twitter. He's since removed it, but this is not the only instance. He followed it up within a few hours with, "Dustin Crowned is a junt," followed also by, "I hope Justin drowns." Here someone replies, "That's nice." Mike replies, "I'm done with nice. Stalking someone and shitting on their character for over a year isn't nice." Later tweeting, "What a sad, pathetic dweeb of a shell of a person you must be to dedicate such a large part of every single day of your life to attacking someone you've never met and will never meet. Shitty hobby. Seriously. Looking to model trains, or D&D, or something." Mike goes on later to post 4 photos of different people saying, "Oh geez, now someone is copying my profile and pretending they're me." In the photo he posts, he shows a profile that looks exactly like his. It states, "I think all of my trolls are the same person. They've never been seen in the same room together, and all look exactly the same."
Well, the thing that you have to understand is that if you just look at the basic evidence here, if you just like look at how active I am with like actually any of this, if you like look at how just mild the activity on the subreddit is, and then you compare it to like all the things Mike like says about me all the time and just like how active he is on Twitter, and not just about me. Like, it's constantly talking about making fun of people that apparently get triggered, calling them snowflakes, just SJW. It seems like in his mind there's a constant conspiracy out to get him. But let's just say, for sake of argument, that I really was this person that just spent all my time thinking about Sword and Scale about how I didn't like it. Even if you looked at my behavior, that's not the behavior of stalking. If you look at like any of my behavior, and let's say you even tripled it, that would be the case of someone that didn't like the show. Like, that would be like saying, oh, when Red Letter Media, discusses George Lucas, they are stalking him. What comes with having a program that's popular, and especially as wildly successful as Sword and Scale, is criticism. And you have to take the criticism with the positivity. When I initially had criticisms of Mike, I actually didn't expect it to be taken this, badly. I actually expected it to be like addressed, like I had actually hoped like, okay, well maybe he'll address some of these things and then move past them. But instead, it's like this constant barrage of like insults and posting my pictures. And it actually makes me nervous. Like, I'm not used to being in this kind of like spotlight, and to have like my photos and my name and where I live and things like that being posted to his users. You never know where like one of them is just going to go and pay me a visit because I'm annoying their idol.
It's not that he hates Sword and Scale. It's that Mike Boudet has made it very difficult for him to enjoy Sword and Scale.
When I was listening to the show, and I couldn't wait for each and every episode, like, I can totally see, why people listen to it. It is excellently produced. The production itself is just incredible. Like, to this day, there's really very few true crime shows that have that level of just sound quality and just even from like the music and just how clear the audio is. And the subject matters are often very morbidly interesting. But unfortunately, despite what he says, I myself, I can't listen to it anymore just because, I've had, it brings negative, emotions out of me just because of my interactions with Mike and other people that have had bad experiences with him.
So if you're wondering, I did contact Mike via email back in July of 2017. Hello, Mike. My name is Dave Rex. I produce the podcast Dave and Isaac Discuss at daveandisaac.com. I'm currently working on an episode about, well, you. I've been looking into Sword and Scale, Universe of Luxury, Lounge Act, and other projects you've been a part of. I've also come across a lot of negative comments and stories of harassment, sexual harassment, lack of respect for victims, and censoring negative comments. I'm not on a witch hunt. I also fully understand if you would prefer not to comment. But I can promise I'm only here to find the truth. I truly enjoy Sword and Scale. I've recently interviewed a big fan of yours. She can vouch for my lack of bias. I hope you choose to participate. I know the internet will never lack negative and vile groups, but I see a lot of people who need to hear a reason why, or to dispel these rumors from the horse's mouth. Thank you for your time and consideration. Mike did reply, "Hi, Dave. I'm sorry that I will have to decline your request, but I did forward your information to several people who may have some things to say. I have not instructed any of them on whether or not they should talk to you. If they reach out, that's their decision. The one thing I will say is that there are 4 people who seem to be behind a lot of these personal attacks. And who runs the secret hate group called The Problem with Sword and Scale. These women appear to be obsessed with me for some reason and scrutinize every word I say. Whenever a thread pops up, they're the ones who perpetrate the lies and post out-of-context screenshots to get others to attack us too. There's obviously something very off with these people, because it's not normal behavior. An obsession of hating and personally attacking a human being they've never met or even had any interaction with, simply because they may disagree with what they said on their podcast, is not a healthy or productive lifestyle. They seem to be consumed with this hatred. I do believe these people have some sort of serious mental illness that I hope they get help for soon. I'm surprised that those close to them haven't intervened already. I've attached a screenshot that shows where their attacks seem to have originated from. Feel free to do whatever you want with it. In the screenshot attached by Boudet, we see a Facebook thread, posted December 14th, 2016. Somebody asks, "Can anyone explain to me what's happening with the Sword and Scale guy? I'm so lost." The comments start pretty simple, talking about how Mike sucks or things that they disagree with, but in short order, it devolves into discussing other podcasts, and even suggestions for replacement shows if you don't like Sword and Scale. So I disagree that this is the origin point of the hate. So where are we left? What do we know? And before we answer these questions, what have we skipped? Around the end of 2002, Mike created a website, MakeMikeAMillionaire.com.
I'd heard about Karen Bosniak's site, SaveKaren.com, and I thought it was a great idea.
That's a clip from a Fox 5 DC local news piece containing Boudet from 2003, taking from the current web fad made famous by Karen Bosniak. SaveKaren.com was a way to have the internet help pay her credit card debt of about $20,000.
And surprise, hundreds of web beggars like Mike started appearing online. Some have heartbreaking appeal, asking for money to feed children, pay medical bills, even leave abusive spouses. But there are just as many sites that proudly have no redeeming social value. They ask you to give them money to pay for breast enhancements, fund their film debut, or in Mike's case, make him a millionaire.
The website is really kind of silly and funny.
An example of that, Mike's over-the-top wish list.
On the website, Mike had many sections to look through, including his wish list, or as he titled it, Things I Want to Buy, including a BMW, a condo on the beach, a weekly maid, and happiness. He also had a bio, a solicitation to have him included in your will, fan letters, a weekly update, and a Cafe Press web store containing mugs, shirts, boxers, and thongs.
While Mike's gotten a lot of positive feedback, there are those who think he is just plain lazy.
I've gotten all kinds of hate mail, just calling me a bum and a freeloader, and everybody jumps to the conclusion that I don't have a job when in fact I do have a rather well-paying job.
Mike's online money-making strategy? To entertain.
For the most part, people come in and they have a distraction for 5 minutes and they figure that's worth $1.
The weekly update page went from weekly updates to intermediate updates in about 3 months. Through the entirety of the website's run we're about to go through, Mike made just about $100, which we'll come to find out spans almost 10 years. From the look of things, Mike originally abandoned the site around September 2003 with the post stating, "I'm so sick of you stupid people who have nothing better to do than me a loser and talk smack simply because you weren't smart enough to think of this idea yourself. I'm smarter than you. I'm better than you. And I'm not here to entertain you for free. So from now on, I hope you like the site because that's all you're going to get until I start seeing some serious money. Yeah, that's right. I'm taking this baby hostage." 5 years later, Boudet did return to the website with the post, "Some guy named Keith just sent me $11 on PayPal. I haven't updated this site for 5 years. Not sure how he found the site or why he decided to be generous. There was no note or email explaining this. Guess I have to update the site now." But he went silent until April 2009, updating a handful of times between then and October 2012, with 2 posts in particular giving a small glimpse into the life of Mike, which is often hidden from the public view. On March 12th, 2010, Boudet posted this long letter. "Holy crap. Am I screwed?" Here's what happened. Have you ever read the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad? Well, neither have I, but I have skimmed through it on occasion while standing in line at Borders waiting to pay for my GQ magazine. It'd be pompous to subscribe. Where was I going with this? Oh yeah. My point is that in the book, the author explains that the other half of us aren't taught certain lessons by our parents. Basically, because our parents never learned them. These lessons include smart money management, the importance of good education, and certain legal and accounting loopholes. One of the latter allows the IRS to tax people on their debt. Surprise! It goes like this. I was a young 30-something and in love. I met a girl who kind of liked me. She didn't have any growths on her face and the right number of limbs, so I asked her to marry me. I didn't have any money and a lot of debt, so I asked my mom for a handout so I could pay off my credit cards in order to be able to use the credit to buy a ring. Lesson number 1. If you're going to get married, don't try and clear out your debt first if the person you're marrying is also in debt. So I bought said ring and we moved to Atlanta, Georgia, where a family was trying to start a new business and wanted us to run it. Lesson number 2, don't get in bed with the family. Turns out I used all that free available credit to get ourselves even deeper in the hole, while writing a check out to my wife's father for the right to run his crappy business. It failed. So I relied on the fact that I had obtained a pretty decent job at a major telecom. However, I wasn't satisfied. I wanted more. I deserved more. So I started trying to figure out how to get it. Soon, the answer came. It's called affiliate marketing, and it was awesome. I could sit at the computer for 20 minutes a day, modify a few ads, and make over $300 a day. This money stream would keep running no matter what I was doing. Even while I was sleeping, I was making money. I know this sounds like an infomercial, but I am not selling you anything. It was totally true. I couldn't believe it myself. Yet I was cashing the checks again and again, so I got used to it. And I quit my real job, stupidly. Things weren't going well in my marriage. I ended up moving back into my parents' house in Miami because my wife at the time had me escorted out of my own house by the authorities after I took her laptop. I use the term her laptop loosely because I had bought it. I suppose I should call it our laptop. But it wouldn't be long before it became her laptop. So I guess she was right. It wouldn't be long before I got served divorce papers and a hefty bill from a divorce attorney. She ended up taking all of my assets. I ended up keeping all my liabilities, which included 3 investment properties that were upside down on their mortgages and wouldn't sell. I tried to make the payments and keep them rented out, but then all my tenants decided to move. All of them, at the same time. The repair cost needed to fix these homes back up in order to rent them again was going to be so high, and I owed so much more than they were worth that my real estate agent advised me to get rid of them via a short sale or deed in lieu. It was around this time that my business started to really fail. In 1 month, I went from making around $220,000 a year to $30,000, and dropping fast. I was unable to pay my income taxes for that year and racked up a $30,000 debt to the IRS. But I set up a payment plan with them and eventually was able to lower that debt to $20,000. The car I had recently bought became too expensive to keep, but I continued to try to make my payments like a responsible borrower. But the investment properties had to go. I simply couldn't keep paying thousands of dollars a month to keep them while the local government continued to try to raise property taxes, while the property values were falling. I stopped making payments to Citibank and Wells Fargo and started inquiring about how to get a short sale or deed in lieu going. It took 3 months of faxing, months of paperwork, then getting a letter saying they wanted something else, then faxing that, then calling and trying to speak to someone, not reaching the right department, getting transferred, waiting on hold for hours only to get hung up on, calling back, waiting. Then, one day, 3.5 months after making my last mortgage payment, I get a nice little letter saying that my application for a deed in lieu is rejected. No other explanation is stated. I call them back, wait on hold again, demand to speak to a supervisor of supervisors, and after about 2 hours of being transferred around, I finally get to speak to someone at Citibank. I explain my situation and ask why they would rather pay an attorney to take me to court for foreclosure rather than just accepting the deed back. This is what he seriously told me. Well, if we do that, then we can't come after you for the difference. I tell them that if they try to come after me, I'll just file bankruptcy and they'll never see a penny, plus incur litigation costs. He says, we'll take our chances. It took them a year to finally get around to a foreclosure. 2 of them last year, and 1 held out until March of this year. Then about a week ago, I got a letter from Freddie Mac. It's a 1099. You see, When you have a debt forgiven by a financial institution, the difference between the loan amount and the value of the property at the time of the forgiveness is treated as ordinary income by the IRS. In other words, this money that I was not able to pay, this debt essentially, is being taxed. I had no idea you could tax debt, or even worse, the inability to pay debt. A house I had bought at $87,500 was now valued at $17,000, which means I had to pay taxes on $70,000 that I never made, and I had 3 houses. This put me on a different tax bracket entirely. When I tallied up, my total bill to the IRS would be over $100,000. Bankruptcy, here I come. To be continued. Followed up by a post just over 1 year later, on March 21st, 2010. Well, a whole year flew by and I'm not exactly sure where to start. I didn't have to file for bankruptcy, but the 3 houses I owned went into foreclosure, and guess what? It wasn't the end of the world. I still have a working credit card with all the credit I need and was able to pay off all my debt. I traded in the Hummer monstrosity complete with its $700 a month loan and got a sensible and attractive Nissan Juke instead, which saves me lots of gas and will be a lot more reliable than that piece of crap I was driving previously. I also talked to an attorney and an accountant, and they helped me figure out my tax situation in a way which erased my debt and even provided me with a refund. So the lesson here is, when things are bad, eventually they'll get better. Unless you die first, that is. The final 2 posts on the website are from May 2011 and October 2012. The first states, "Okay, as promised, here is my new idea. Talking for Cash." Talking for Cash has a website. Here was the description from the homepage. "Be part of the fun by getting me to say anything you want on webcam. $1 equals 1 word. 25 words minimum. Videos will be sorted on the homepage in the order of highest word count first. So, the more words you buy, the higher your video will be ranked. Words cannot be appended to your video after your order. Sorry, all sales are final. Your video will be posted on our YouTube channel and remain on the homepage of Talking for Cash indefinitely. I cannot control how long they stay up on YouTube. That's up to YouTube. After my millionth word, no more submissions will be accepted. This is a family-friendly site, so no profanity or hate speech of any kind will be tolerated, and I reserve the right to cancel your order and refund your money if I find the content of your request video inappropriate for whatever reason." Mike's October 2012 post simply stated, "Okay, so that was a dumb idea." In August of 2016, Mike Boudet was pulled over and arrested and charged with a DUI. A tweet from Mike Boudet on August 13th, 2016 states, "Last week, I was arrested and charged with a DUI because I refused the field sobriety tests. Case is pending. Look it up if you're a loser." In the time since then, it seems Mike has done his due diligence and he's gotten his arrest record taken care of. You can no longer find his mugshot or any information without having a paid service to look into somebody's past. I mean, that's all there really is to that one. That's all I found. Next segment! Okay. So is that all of it? Well, no. But that's never all of it. This is where we leave off, though. Since 2014, Mike Boudet has had a podcast. A true crime podcast using ambient music, court proceedings, interrogations, and interviews to weave together a story. The podcast has done very well. Mike has had many attempts at success, and this one took. He's gained a public reputation that is less than negative. Is it deserved? Well, honestly, probably not. While that could be argued endlessly, I don't know that it is deserved. I think Mike has a very aggressive and dry sense of humor. Do I agree with it? Rarely. I think Mike has shown some ignorance to mental health problems, but in reality, it's a huge debate among many people. This isn't his alone to be aware of. In fact, he's having to see it in many different forms on more occasions based on his occupation. Now, that could just make him more jaded and see it much more black and white, or those two colors could begin to blend to the point of finding that gray area. Overall, I simply think Mike isn't the best at reacting to criticism. That's a common thread people like to bring up. I'm sure Boudet must be tired of hearing it. Do I think some people go way too far and that those are the voices speaking loudest at times? Yes. But a crowd of people will drown out a few awful voices. Now, in my opinion, if you're the one with the microphone, the voice, the audience, you shouldn't use it to point out those few. It seems those that enjoy your work endlessly are getting less of your attention and time. Now, I'd like to say I'm not a podcaster who has a place to give Mike Boudet advice. Dude's getting a TV show, and I'm taking a year to make one audio podcast. So, after all of that time, what do I think? Well, I was going to write a few paragraphs to make this a real monologue ending, until I saw a post on Reddit that really summed it all up for me. XX Candy Butts XX wrote, I personally don't think this is worth your time. There's nothing to really expose here. He's just not a great person who puts out a relatively decent podcast that's been declining in quality lately. I want to thank Tanya, Raina, Sarah, and Justin for joining me on this episode. I'd also like to thank everyone who contributed to the Reddit thread. And thank you, Mike, for putting out a podcast that can really cause some rain to pour. To see pictures, links, and show notes for this podcast, you can visit daverex.net. Finally, thank you everyone who listened. I appreciate your time and patience. This episode was a weird learning experience for me and a heck of a thing to follow. I'll talk to you on the next one.